Now, if there weren't, of course, we had to carry out the necessary adjustments to ensure that the engine was satisfactory for flight testing.
Once the ground testing was completed, the aircraft were towed across the Chester Road, over playing fields, which now house the Castle Vale estate, to the flight shed. Whatever the state of air raid alerts, day or night, the pilots kept on testing. But despite the intensity of the flying, the Spitfire seldom let them down.
We flew whenever the weather conditions would permit, and there were not many days when we were not able to fly. But with production test flying, you are merely testing that aircraft to the extremities for which it was designed. As a combat aircraft, that it must stand up to the stresses for which it was designed, it must have the performance for which it was designed. I had a very, very good team of loyal, dedicated, conscientious pilots, but I had the advantage over them insofar as they had been trained to use radio. At Castle Bromwich we had no radio aids on the ground, neither did we have any radio aids in the aircraft. I soon came to realize that Hams Hall Towers, which used to have this enormous plume of steam coming out of it 24 hours a day, and sometimes as high as 5,000 or 6,000 feet. When you were up into brilliant sunshine above the cloud, you could see this slight disturbance over the cloud, which indicated to me that the steam was coming up, disturbing the cloud, and that's where Castle Bromwich was. And time again, I would spiral down this little disturbance of the cloud and find myself literally over Castle Bromwich. The only thing that I worried about was that one of these days I might be too damn clever and actually go down into the spout of the Hams Hall itself.
The dedication of the test pilots was matched by that of the ground crews, who kept the delivery of the Spitfire on target. There was another member of the flight shed team who always recognized the approaching aircraft, Alex Henshaw's dog, Tony.
He was a Labrador that I bred myself, and he'd flown all his life. He used to fly with me as a pup. He used to sit on my lap in the Leopard Moth, and when he got bigger, he used to sit on the back seat of the Leopard Moth, so he probably knew as much about aircraft as I did.
Castle Bromwich became a showpiece during the war years for many visitors from home and abroad. Notable amongst them was King George VI, who gave encouragement to everyone at the factory. There was the Regent of Iraq, a keen flyer himself. The Churchills, who made several visits to boost morale. And America's First Lady, Eleanor Roosevelt. But whoever the visitor, Alex put on a show.
The aerobatics which he performed with the Spitfire were probably finer than anything I'd seen up to that time, and probably ever since. He could really handle the Spitfire, and lots of people said he'll kill himself, you know, but he didn't. He knew what he was doing. He cut it very fine on a few occasions, particularly when Churchill came. He gave a very special display, and that was exceptionally low. And in fact, I believe Churchill said, "My boy, never do that again for my benefit." Something like that, you know.
He was a natural, I believe. He'd become a national figure years before that, when he beat the record from England to Cape Town and back again. And his record still holds today for single-engine aircraft. He became a kind of a figurehead in a way. You know, little stories used to float back from across the airfield, you know, about he'd bailed out or something like that and got away with it, you know. And we all thought he was a bit of a brave lad, you know, and a clever lad as well, you know.
Once the aircraft testing was completed, the Auxiliary Air Service collected them and took them to their squadrons. These were tropicalized Spitfires, delivered between April and September of 1942. They were fitted with a special air filter to keep sand from the engines. This aircraft, EP-700, was destined for Abbotssinch in Scotland before finally setting out from Britain in August 1942 on the dangerous journey to Malta. As the log shows, it arrived on the George Cross Island in September, and apart from sustaining damage in action 2 months later, appears to have survived the war. Not all aircraft were so fortunate, and the pressure to keep up supplies from Castle Bromwich never ceased.
There was a great feeling of urgency, you know, that we got to get on with it. And if we didn't get on with it, we weren't going to win. And if we weren't going to win, well, that was going to be pretty bad, you know. I think we were all very conscious of that because we got relations in the forces.
Everybody wanted the war to be won. And I don't know, there was a great camaraderie, I think, amongst everyone during the war years. Whether, you know, perhaps you feared death the next day from a bombing raid, I don't know, but there was a great camaraderie which doesn't seem to exist in peacetime.
And there was no sort of lagging or anything. There was everybody, you know, did their best, which, you know, I feel rather proud that I was just a small cog, but, well, I've got one plaque that's been kept over the years, and it's hung up in the room. I've had it a good many years, 47 years. It's a long while.
When the war was on, you couldn't refuse to work, even when the bombs was all, delayed action bombs were right around by the wing, you know. But you'd be a fifth columnist if you didn't go to work, you know. It was lovely, which was back here now. People didn't seem to bring their troubles too much to bear, you know. I'm amazed, really, when I think about it, when I know the number of people who had their houses bombed. Sometimes it would be raids, maybe 10 or 12 nights in succession or something like that, and each day you'd hear about someone who had their house bombed or damaged or something like that. And they just carried on. It was amazing, really. There was a bomb come down, two bombs. The one blew the, you know, done a lot of damage, and the other was a delayed action bomb. And we all had to wear these tin hats after that. And the incendiary bomb was to light the place up. They'd come down near me, so I thought, oh, thank you, I'll have that for the souvenir. We only wore our hats after the bombing, and very heavy on your head. Your head kept nodding.
Not everyone was as lucky as Edna. More than 200 bombs were dropped on Castle Bromwich, and at least 11 workers were killed. But production was never stopped.
It was a pilot's aircraft, so anyone that flew it would immediately fall in love with it. There's no question about that. It was also loved by the people at the time of the Battle of Britain because of its tremendous success. But not only was it successful in shooting down aircraft, I think it's possibly the only aircraft in the history of warfare that had a tremendous psychological effect on the young pilots of the enemy Air Force.
Over 11,500 Spitfires were made at Castle Bromwich between June 1940 and November 1945, more than half of all those ever built. Through the efforts of the ordinary men and women working there, the Spitfire became the symbol of the nation's courage and something unique in aviation history.
Castle Bromwich, at its heights, was the showpiece for the whole of the Allied aviation industry in our part of the world.
Whoever had the idea of building that factory, they possibly helped to win the war or saved us, you know, because it was purpose-built for the job.
Their homes were being blitzed. They had their personal worries with their family. They may have had brothers or fathers or sons or relatives in the forces. That they themselves, after their job, they may have been in the St. John's ambulance brigade, they may have been fire watching, they may have been in the home guard, 1,001 things, and to say nothing of the problem of getting backwards and forwards from work. And I think they were, you know, a splendid bunch of people. And I would have thought, as Churchill said, you know, this was the British nation at its best. And this was their finest hour.